What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to another video. So on the M3 we are going to be installing some TrackSpec hood vents. These are going to help with a multitude of things. Overall, the goal here is to kind of reduce some of the temperature inside of the engine bay. While I'm tracking, I see coolant temps getting up to about 230 degrees and kind of hovering around there after a couple warm-up laps. So that's a little bit too hot for me. I think the car needs to be a little bit cooler when kind of beating the crap out of it on the track. So these are going to do a couple of things. They're going to help by creating negative air pressure above the hood where these air vents are when the air flows over, thus kind of pulling and extracting heat out of the engine bay. By doing that, airflow is going to flow faster through the radiator and kind of help keep those temps down. At the same time, these do provide a little bit of, I guess you would call it drag or downforce of some sort, just because these vents are at an angle where as the air does hit it, it does create some downward force, hopefully increasing some front traction as well. Now with this kit, I decided to get the center section, these side sections, and these do come with all the necessary hardware such as the rivets. The only thing you need is going to be kind of some basic tools. You're going to need a grinder in order to cut your hood. You're going to need some masking tape, and then obviously you're going to need that rivet gun. This does come with some nice instructions that I've read through a couple of times, but with this video I'm hoping that we can make this a little bit easier for you when you get this kit yourself. Now if you're looking for everything I have here today, I will put it down in the description below for you guys. But with that, let's get started. So first step is we're going to throw a couple pieces of masking tape kind of down the center of the hood. Luckily we have these vents here which kind of give us a good idea generally where the center is. So we're just going to throw a couple of these down here. We know that these vents are somewhat centered, so I'm just going to keep it kind of between these for now. Now once we are at this point, we're going to grab a measuring tape across multiple points along the hood from front to back, and we're going to basically create a bunch of dots along the way every couple inches so that we know the midpoint of the hood. Afterwards, we're going to turn that into one full center line by connecting all those dots. So now that we have a nice straight center line after measuring across and creating a bunch of dots and connecting them all together, now we're going to get our first template set up. In order to do this, we're going to measure from the front line of the hood, right at the top, kind of where it begins, like the flatter part of the hood. So we're just going to go up basically like an inch or so. We're going to measure 14 inches in, and then we're going to tape this first template into place. And so we're going to want to tape the sides so that we can make sure that this is straight. This wind is not making this very easy. And so there's holes in this template which allow you to kind of line up the center point from top to bottom. So that's right there. Yep, center, center. Now you can tape it down on the sides. So now that we have the front one centered and placed kind of evenly left and right and front and back, we can now move on to the side one. Now this one's is kind of a little bit more difficult in order getting lined up, just because underneath the hood there are like basically frame supports that go along the side, and if you lift up your hood and kind of take a look, it spans basically like 3 to 4 inches across from the outside of the hood. So you have to kind of look underneath the hood multiple times to make sure that you're lining this up properly. In the instructions, it does tell you to go about 3.5 inches from the top and the bottom, which is the B imprint here on the template, and C as well. And then when you're kind of lining this thing up, you also want to avoid being on any of this hump in the hood that lifts. So just takes a couple times going up and underneath, looking above and underneath, looking to see where these cut marks are going to be, because you want them to be on basically just the hood and not any of the supports that the hood uses underneath. But once you have that kind of lined up, what I did is I just kind of set up here, taped it, went underneath, looked at it, moved it a little over, moved it back, stuff like that, just to kind of get it where it should be. So personally for me, I found that
just right at 4 inches from kind of the edge of this template is the sweet spot for avoiding the kind of the supports on the inside of the hood. Looking underneath, this is not going to hit anything when I go to cut. These are going to be kind of a little bit more inward than I think their design calls for. But if I had these any closer this way, it would start to hit the seam of that kind of support rail. So I really don't want to hit anything and screw up the integrity of the hood. So we're gonna go from there, which is 4 inches in at the top and at the bottom as well. And we're basically just gonna copy that on the other side. So now that basically we've got all 3 templates laid out on the hood, it is very important that we pretty much just remeasure every single corner of all these templates and make sure everything's perfectly even. All these lines down here, like, we never, based on the directions, it doesn't really say to measure off of the centerpiece for the sides, but I want to make sure that, you know, we're even on the outside of the templates as well as the inside. And I also want to make sure that we have a nice straight edge here for all 3 templates, and so that doesn't look off. So I'm going to go through this whole thing, basically remeasure everything, maybe measure it twice, because once we start cutting, that's it. Otherwise we need another hood, and don't really want to do that. So now that we've got these templates pretty secured, I decided to throw on a bunch more tape just because I really don't want these things to move. When I start cutting, I'm actually going to probably throw some down here before we cut anything. But once we get everything into place and we are very satisfied with how everything's lined up and measured, we're going to want to go underneath the hood. If you still have it, there is like some heat shielding here. You're going to want to take all that out. You can remove all these little pins that hold it in. I kind of just left mine in. I don't know why. Be taking those out soon. But basically take all that out. And then it's a good idea to probably get like some blankets or like a sheet that you don't care about and lay it underneath under here so that any of the shavings and metal stuff that comes from cutting doesn't fly into your engine. I don't think it'll cause any harm, but it's better just to be clean when you can. Plus, if you're cutting through the hood and you go too deep, you'll hit the blanket and you'll probably notice that before you hit something on your engine. And it would really suck to hit this strut brace and cut that because I have to get a new one. All right, there we go, nice and covered. So we are going to follow the recommendation from TrackSpec of drilling 3/8 holes into all the long cut, at the ends of all the long cuts. So there's basically 4 on the sides and then there's 8 for the center one, because we're going to do 1 on each of the center long cuts just before that center line. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, same on the other side. So there's 16 total, but we're going to start over here on this side. All right, so there's 1. God, that kind of hurt a little bit, just drilling into my head. All right, time for some more scary stuff. We are going to use the grinding wheel, and we're going to cut along these dashed lines here, basically finishing the whole cut along the way. And hopefully after doing the whole thing, this panel kind of drops out. If not, we kind of can just connect the corners to get this thing to fall out. So obviously the template came off, which is good because it means we've cut the right spots. Looks like a little bit of error on my part, which hopefully you guys can learn from, is on the template itself
where these kind of the dotted lines were, at the corner point, there's actually a little dimple. It's kind of really small to see. It's actually clear in some spots, but not the others. That is where you want to drill your 3/8 hole. As you can see, I kind of drew it a little lower of that. It shouldn't cause an issue at all, really, because this whole thing is just going to get covered up by the vents. But basically, at the corner point where you cross your cuts, that's kind of where the 3/8 hole would be drilled. I'm not really a fabricator or a woodworker of any sort, so if I had known that, might have gone a little bit easier with the cuts, but I was able to get them across just fine without having any issues. Basically, this thing should just kind of come off. It's coming off in some spots. May have to touch up a couple of the corners here, but that's pretty much it. Going to continue on with this on the other side, and then we'll make our way to the center. All right, well, no going back from here, right? So these middle ones didn't really fall out, so I'm probably having to take off these center ones. The outside ones kind of went with no problem. There's a little spot there. But I'm gonna clean up kind of this whole area around, just so I don't rub up against this and scratch the hood a bunch with metal. So underneath the hood, there's kind of like an X of some reinforcement. Looks like we're gonna have to cut a lot deeper in these areas. So I'm gonna have to kind of go over those spots and cut those out. And I don't know if I'll be able to reach them from the top, but we'll give that a shot first. If not, we have to come from the bottom and kind of finish these cuts underneath. So after doing kind of a little trimming underneath where these kind of reinforcements are, we were able to make some room and cut them out. And now we got holes in the hood, so that's cool. This frame support here is like kind of not perfectly cut straight, so I think I'm gonna go back and make sure that's straight, as well as this little one over here. But other than that, cutting these out turned out pretty good. I would say maybe tape down these bottom kind of parts of the template a little bit better, because this one's starting to come up. But other than that, not too bad. So now we are hopefully done with the cutting. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of lift up the hood, and all the sharp edges, I'm going to grab a little file and just clean them up so they're nice and smooth, so I'm not going to cut myself working around here. That one drops in. The cruise control kind of wire there is a little bit in the way. So this thing's like flat, so it is going to have to get like kind of sucked down on the corners into the hood. That shouldn't be a problem though. That one, yeah, these end ones fit in like butter, but definitely the center one is flat and the hood's rounded. So it's gonna, obviously those rivets are gonna kind of have to suck it down on the ends, but that's what it should look like. Dang, that looks sick. Very nice. I'm excited. This has got, you know, a lot of room to move around. Luckily the templates have the end holes for where this thing should sit. So it should be kind of like there. All right, so now we got to move on to drilling the holes for the rivets. And for these, we're going to start with the center one, because that's the center of the car, so we want to make sure that that is as lined up as possible. And we left our tape on so we know where the center point is. So there's our center hole. Pivot off that and line it up like so. We're going to use a 1/8 drill bit to pre-tap these holes on, and then from there we'll kind of follow around and do the rest of them. So now with a 1/8 drill bit, we're going to go through the pilot holes of the louvers itself, matching up with the template. Drill a hole all the way through. It is going to bore out the louvers a little bit, but that'll give us enough room to put the rivets in.
Now that we have our first pre-drilled hole down here on the bottom, now we can put our first rivet in. Beforehand, we're going to want to remove this tape so it doesn't get stuck underneath the vent, since now that we have a good idea of where center is. And for this, the rivets have a washer that goes on the bottom side that you kind of want to hold up with some pliers when you go to put this thing in. And so you can see here, I just got a generic rivet gun. I'll throw one in the description below that I like. Harbor Freight has a lot of good options. This washer is going to go underneath the hood and kind of sit on the rivet there. And we're just going to continue to clamp this thing down until it breaks away. They do recommend that you put a little bit of masking tape here because rivet guns, when you go to get that pop to break away the stem, they kind of jump around a little bit. I'm kind of just going to risk it. This thing's going to get beaten up anyway since it's already got a bunch of rock chips on it, so I'm not too worried about it. But hopefully this first one goes smoothly. So I'm just going to take a look, make sure that that washer is seated, which it is. And there's our first rivet. And this thing does still have obviously some sway to it. So now you can go ahead and line up your top one and drill that hole and then do the rivet. And at that point, it's not really going to move. So then you can start working on the other sides. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this template that was underneath here out. And I'm going to clean the area underneath so we don't have a bunch of crap underneath the... So that's pretty much the process, just drilling out the holes, making sure everything stays lined up, throwing your rivets in, and basically just continuing throughout the whole thing. As for the sides, you're basically going to follow the exact same method that you did with the centerpiece, basically taking all those measurements again, getting it taped up. Fortunately, we do have the template still in place here, and that's why I left it. On the corners, there are markers for you to use to get those pilot holes started. But I'm going to finish this up, and then at the end, I'll give you guys a little walk around of how it looks